This week in the enterprise news, we're talking about Barracuda is launching a new cloud security guardian integrating with Amazon Detective. Sophos launches a new cloud-based threat intelligence and analysis platform. Accenture launches a cloud-native solution to help clients. And 10 notable cybersecurity acquisitions of 2019, Part 2. I didn't find Part 1, but it's mostly stuff we've talked about. In the second segment, we welcome James Carter, the Chief Security Officer and Vice President at Logarithm, to discuss measuring and maturing security operations maturity. Whew. In our final segment, we welcome Jamie Butler, the tech lead at Elastic Security, to talk about how improving security requires reducing complexity. And a whole lot more in that conversation. Jamie's got some great stuff to talk about. So stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Networks are becoming increasingly complex and fragmented, and digital transformation and DevOps are driving an explosion in network connectivity changes. With each new network connection, cyber attackers may gain another opening to breach or traverse the network. At Tufin, they've pioneered a policy-based approach to network security management using automation and analytics. As a result, you can make network changes in minutes instead of days, reliably and securely. To learn more about Tufin, the security policy company, go to securityweekly.com/Tufin and sign up for a free evaluation. By the end of 2020, 99% of exploited vulnerabilities will be publicly disclosed and known to IT system admins. The consequences of that fact means the burglar will already be in your house because you left the front door wide open by failing to patch known vulnerabilities. How can you keep the threat actors out? Through cloud-based automation, Automox enables you to slam the door on unpatched OS and third-party vulnerabilities across your entire Windows, Mac, and Linux infrastructure. Take advantage of a free trial with Automox to not only see the vulnerability status of your infrastructure, but do something about it within minutes. Start automating the fundamentals of cyber hygiene at securityweekly.com/Automox. That's securityweekly.com/Automox. Most cloud threats are your responsibility, not your cloud service providers, and prevention-based security isn't enough on its own. That's why Gartner predicts that 60% of enterprise security budgets will go towards detection and response in 2020. ExtraHop RevealX Cloud delivers cloud-native network detection and response for the hybrid enterprise, the only SaaS-based NDR solution for AWS. Request your 30-day free trial of RevealX Cloud at extrahop.com/trial. That's extrahop.com/trial. Welcome to episode 165 of Enterprise Security Weekly for December 11th, 2019. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Mr. Jeff Mann. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, good to see you, Paul.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on today. Mr. John Strand is here with us remotely as well. John, welcome.
Hello. Good to be back again.
Yes, nice to have you both on the show today. Quick announcement, join us at InfoSec World 2020, March 30th through April 1st at the Disney Contemporary Resort. Security Weekly listeners will save 15% off the InfoSec World Main Conference or World Pass by visiting securityweekly.com/ISW 2020. Lots of great talks, as I've seen the talks that will be given there, as we are closely partnered with InfoSec World. Matt Alderman and I are also hosting a Container Security Day as well, which would be a lot of fun. We're running our annual listener feedback survey. Please visit securityweekly.com. Choose the drop-down menu for surveys and fill that out, as it helps us shape the show for the next year in terms of what content you want to see and things of that nature. So please do that. Let's see. Now we're on to the enterprise security news. We get started. We were talking about AWS Outposts just before the start of the show. Booz Allen Hamilton announces support for Outposts. I'm not sure what their role. I think they'll help you like roll it out and get it deployed, kind of thing.
Well, I think that this is similar to the Accenture story that we have a little bit later from AP, where these companies, having worked at one of these firms, the way it usually works is you want to build out something, whether it's cloud infrastructure or CRM, finance database, whatever it is. And then you hire Booz, or you hire Accenture, or you hire Bearing Point, or you hire these firms to come in and they build it. And basically, they're the jack of all trades, whether it's web development, database backend, custom development, you name it, these companies can do it. And this is just basically Booz Allen Hamilton saying, yep, we can do this activity. So I don't know if it's all that interesting. The thing that got me, and I think it got you too, is Outposts. So I was like, what the hell is that? And I looked into it. And you kind of had some interesting takes on Outposts, Paul.
Well, yeah. So some of the problems you have is when you're developing an application, and we've talked about this on the show this year, you got to make a decision. Once you start breaking your application into multiple services and components, now you can say, well, which services, components do I want to build myself and have locally, right? Maybe my secrets vault, right? Maybe I've got a container. I'm using the vault from HashiCorp, and I'm doing that there. Or if my application and services are in AWS, I can use AWS Secrets Manager, right? So now you got decisions to make. But when you start taking services and components of your application, putting them in AWS, how do you develop now? Like, how do you build a development environment locally that doesn't require an internet connection to go out and reach out to AWS to access those services? Now you need multiple services in AWS to be development. So when we're looking at Outposts, it basically, you have a physical server, which I learned from Amazon, that is installed locally, that you can run all these, not all, but a lot of AWS services locally to do development. I was like, that's great. And then I looked at the cost, and the lowest model they had that I saw very quickly, and I haven't dug into it in any great detail, was $7,000 and change a month.
So I have a stupid question. Isn't that where we started? Was we hosted our own servers?
Right?
It's come full circle, right, Jeff?
Is it possible that it might be cheaper just to maintain the status quo?
You got it wrong. It's an on-prem cloud.
Yeah.
Get it right, man.
But it's a great point, Jeff. And what we run into is the complexities in our build process, right? So maybe we do want to build things ourselves and push them up to the cloud. In that sense, whether I build it locally or push it up to the cloud, if they're just hosting my application, that's cool. But when you start using cloud components, like, how do I have a build for every developer that now needs to have something that they have to reach out into the cloud? So it's really, a lot of it is like developer focused. Now I'm incurring costs in the cloud for doing things like development, right?
And that gets into a kind of a story we were talking about at the beginning of the show, like a good cost model and where this will save you a lot of money. Is if you have specific services and they transfer a tremendous amount of data, It may make a lot of sense to have those locally. So it's transferring on your local network. So you get those cost savings, because as we were joking, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Just data transfer fees to kick up around $25,000 or much, 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 much more very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So it might make a lot of sense to have those on local prem.
This is almost this is meant to be a tongue-in-cheek question, but I'm almost thinking it may not be. But is the next generation then a hosted version of the on-prem version of the cloud version of what you used to have on site? In other words, are we just going to go back to co-location? And
I think that's where it's headed for something.
Yeah,
I think for something for development and skunkworks and those types of things.
Right.
I think yes, but I think ultimately your enterprise services that your users touch are predominantly going to be cloud facing. They're going to be loaded up.
Yeah, and the other thing that we struggle with is testing, right? So we have a database in our application, right? So I can put a database locally on my Linux box. I can build a container to host a database. In production, my database is an RDS. Before my code goes out, I got to make sure it works with the RDS database, because that's what production is. That's the service that production is using. So how do I test that, right? So now I've got scripts that can build a local database inside of a container. Then I got to push it up to my test environment, which has to now live in Amazon's cloud to test it with RDS. Now I need a test RDS database, which I have to pay for. Then I can move my code to production, which is also using RDS. That's the issues that we struggle with.
I've got a question for you, though, Paul, on Outpost. Is this the actual services? Like, you're actually getting like Redis, or you're getting Kinesis, or you're getting all of these different things?
From what I understand, yeah.
Okay, so here's another thing, right? And I'd love to get you guys' opinion on this. Part of the security model of the cloud is it's almost a black box security through obscurity approach, right? Don't test Kinesis, don't test Lambda, don't test these things. All that source code exists out there, right? And the binaries exist out there in the cloud. With this, whenever we're dealing with Outposts, the concern that I have, and it's not even a concern really, it's a good security thing, but My issue is now all of a sudden, a lot of these components that have been behind the curtain are now going to be exposed to customers. And some of those customers may be working with nation states, and they'll be able to actually get those binaries, start doing reverse engineering.
It's true.
My question is, do we now open up more security vulnerabilities? Because a lot of the stuff has not been assessed in the open at all yet.
Yeah. It says in the Outpost, webpage, not documentation, but like just their explanation of the service, that it's the same hardware and the same software that is creating those services in Amazon's cloud is really now just running locally in your environment. So you're right, John, someone could now potentially have access to some of that they wouldn't being just accessing the cloud.
But isn't that I come from a school of thought that doesn't believe in security through obscurity, but if you're exposing, code and code bases that were, more or less formerly black boxed, isn't that what everybody else is trying to do anyway with bug bounties and whatnot? We want more people looking at the code to find all the vulnerabilities. Perhaps, we have to make sure the good guys are doing it at least as fast as the bad guys, but
I agree. But
don't we do that anyway everywhere else?
No, and I think that there's a fundamental difference. Whenever you're looking at APIs that are exposed, you're absolutely right on the bug bounty side of it, right? But there's a large difference between seeing the externally facing APIs and getting full access to the actual executables themselves. And those are two different types of security assessments, right? You have like a full white box assessment where you get access to possibly source code or the binaries themselves, and then the APIs that are actually exposed. So I agree with you in the aspect that security through obscurity in this regard is total garbage. But I can't think of any situation where somebody has had code that has been very, very, very much black box, locked off, and then it gets exposed to the community and it's ended well. Very, very quickly, vulnerabilities are discovered. More vulnerabilities are discovered once you gain access to that back end. And you
I agree with that, but don't we collectively want to know that those vulnerabilities are out there? Or
don't we hope that Amazon's contracted with someone to have different folks look at their architecture?
Well, put it this way: I don't trust anybody that's got black boxed software in any form, and I think this holds true for all the new cloud stuff. I don't trust anybody that says, "Don't worry about it, we got it. We're XYZ company. You can trust it." And that's
one of the problems. You trust Google Cloud Compute, you trust Amazon, you trust Azure for these services, and basically what they are saying in many, many, many regards is trust us. And I agree with you, Jeff. I think we're in violent agreement here. But the thing that concerns me is I believe having this being black boxed for so long and now all of a sudden making it accessible, I'm worried. I'm very, very, very worried about the security vulnerabilities that may be coming out of that. So it could be that Amazon has hired the best security pen testers in the world and they found all security vulnerabilities and all the Easter eggs are gone and life is wonderful and it's powered by unicorn farts or whatever. I doubt it.
So back in the day, we had this thing called IVNV, Independent Verification and Validation. So third-party testing, in other words. Does Google, Apple, Amazon, any of these large companies that effectively say trust us, do any of them offer proffer? We've had a third party tested by such and such a firm. So not only do you can you trust us, but here's an external third party source that backs up or gives our claims some veracity.
Yeah, there's a testing standard for that, right? And the name escapes me at the moment.
Letter of attestation is what we call it.
Yeah, so, but there's certain standards for cloud providers.
There are, absolutely. And the issue that I have with that, and I think this is an important issue, but the issue that I have with that is it's very, very, very easy to find a firm that'll do a crap job, number one. Number two, it is also very easy, since we've done a lot of testing for some of these cloud companies, and some of them are amazing. Like if you're working with Amazon, AWS,
you're not saying you're one of the crap companies, though, right?
No. Let's back up. Let's make this more interesting, right? If I could say, yeah, we're great. So we've had engagements where we have done crap work, and I want to clarify what that actually means. We've had engagements with some cloud vendors, not the big three, where we've showed up. They've given us 3 notebook computers, and they're like, "Hey, get this thing working." We didn't show up with a working product to start with. Found out that the notebook computers they gave us were underpowered and would never run on those computer systems. Locked us up so we didn't have any internet access whatsoever. We had to do everything locally. And then at the end of that, they're like, we still found GetS and a bunch of vulnerabilities in their source code that were actually fairly catastrophic. And at the end of that delightful engagement that was a week long, they said, we want a letter of attestation saying our crap's secure. That's a worst case scenario. But what I'm saying is a letter of attestation is not always mean the same thing that a lot of people are looking for.
I agree.
Yeah, and the other article is Accenture is launching a cloud native solution, right? So this is kind of like it's similar to what you're saying before, right? There's a big consulting company leveraging cloud architecture on the back end, but the front end is their interface to their cloud solutions, what Accenture announced.
And this is getting into a problem with the big five consulting firms, right? I mean, if you're working with big five consulting firms and legacy infrastructures, they're very good at that. Like you want to upgrade your Active Directory, Accenture, Booz, and all these companies can come in and do that. That's great, right? But as soon as you start working with cloud solutions, once again, kind of springboarding off the earlier conversation, where so much of it is completely behind the curtain. And many of these firms, these big consulting firms, were really behind the curve in adopting and getting up to speed on cloud technologies. That's why you're seeing Booz. That's why you're seeing Accenture stand up and say, hey, we can actually do cloud. Because most CIOs, whenever you're thinking about a cloud solutions provider and migration, you're not thinking of Accenture and Booz. You're thinking of other firms or planning on working with Amazon and Google Cloud Compute and Azure directly.
Well, and I think we kind of evangelized the movement to the cloud, but this article about cloud migration problem says that 9 out of 10 U.S. enterprises have run into cloud migration problems, holding back their migration, right? 94% of enterprises run applications on legacy operating systems. And how do you take those and then move them to the cloud? One of the issues is security, right, and trust of the cloud. The other issue is trying to understand how all of this stuff works to actually make the migration. Once you do that, then you have to understand how security applies in that environment, because while it is kind of the same, there's a lot of differences that you have to adapt your security strategy, because you're losing control over some things that you normally have more control over, right? So you have to protect your code and your applications and your data in a much different way when it's hosted up in the cloud.
I think that's
I'm sorry, Jeff. I agree with you and disagree with you, Paul. Only in as much I agree with you in what you said to be true. I disagree in terms of I didn't click through to the research that this article is referring to, but I would be mildly surprised if security was listed in the top 10 or whatever reasons that companies are having problems with their migration. Just a hunch, but I didn't have time to click through and read the research.
So on that, I've got a question that I really want to get your opinion on, Jeff. So whenever you're looking at migration, you can go to one of two paths, right? So an organization can simply migrate their operating systems and existing application stacks to the cloud, right? You can spin up your AMIs, you can have your operating system loaded up. That's not what a lot of cloud vendors want you to do. They want you to use the cloud native toolkits to actually re-implement and architect your application so it's native in the cloud in Azure, Google Cloud Compute, and Amazon. The question I have with this is that actually a good idea? And the reason why is if it's on an operating stack, it's more portable. And I'm going to have people that are DevOps Nazis come after me. I believe it's more portable. If I choose to move it to Google, I can move it to Google. If it's Amazon, it's Amazon. I can bring it on-prem. But once you've committed to a vendor and you've completely rewritten your entire application, you're very much at the whim of that vendor and the services that they provide. And I don't know. I still come back to, is that necessarily the right play for many organizations?
Yeah, it is a case-by-case basis, right? I mean, go back to my secrets manager. If I have a container in my app that I control and I build in my secrets manager, I can host that container in any cloud provider, right, as an example. Or if I build my whole application to use AWS Secrets Manager, now it's not as portable to the other cloud providers. At least that function of it.
Point of parliamentary procedure. I believe John had directed that question at me.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
That's okay. I think there's an analogy here to, think of any great large enterprise company that you've had as a customer where they've bought into, and we don't even have to name a particular product, but let's say, a SIM solution, or in the earlier days, a brand of firewalls, or even a brand of network gear. I've had too many customers that have made huge investments in technologies and applications and solutions that they never got working, or it never worked as advertised in the early days. As an example, I remember visiting a customer that had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in a early intrusion detection system called Real Secure, which was put out by a company called ISS. Literally was sitting in the boxes, propping open the data center door because it was too hot. And I'm like, well, I got to cite you as a violation for not having the data center locked. And oh, by the way, it's your IDS product. So, I think that kind of thing, yes, John, I think it is something to be concerned about, but I don't see any way that companies don't end up falling into that same trap that they've done numerous other times over the years of, information technology, where they lock into some large enterprise solution and they're kind of stuck with it.
Yeah, because you don't know who's going to come out with the next feature that may better suit your requirements, right? So
I guess to back up to our earlier article about what were those things called? The outposts. They commit to AWS, or they commit to Amazon, and now they're committing development and DevOps and their test labs to the environment, even if it's back on prem or it's in the cloud. They're spending more and more money, which is what the providers want you to do anyway. Right. So the biggest, and it's overly simplistic, but I think the biggest lie, if there is a lie, is come to the cloud. It's cheaper. You can save.
Yeah, not necessarily, right?
Yep.
But more and more stuff is in the cloud. Barracuda launched the Cloud Security Guardian integration with Amazon Detective. And I think this is a growing trend, right? Big cloud provider, we established the big three, has some components to give you security analysis tools and protection tools, right? Advanced threat protection in Microsoft in Azure had some updates, right? And security companies are now going, well, we can integrate with that technology. Rather than replace it, but we can also pull in the data from these various Amazon. I mean, there's a ton of Amazon ones that came out because reInvent just happened a week or so ago.
Yeah.
Well, mention the Sophos article where they're putting out a new cloud-based threat intelligence and analysis platform. So, moving the tools to the cloud. But before we started broadcasting, I was rummaging in my drawer. I was clicking on the article, and I clicked on the Sophos link to go to the Sophos website. And Johnny, if you would be so kind to show what the website, reload it if you can, Johnny. That's the one I wanted. And I saw that, and I'm like, oh, wow, it's an attractive woman sitting at a desk in front of a computer. Reminds me a whole lot of this ad, which I clipped from something that used to be called a magazine. Back in 1990, a print magazine, back in 1998, where they had Network Associates was the company, and I think they had recently acquired, who did they acquire? I want to say the Wheel, no, not the Wheel.
Could be the Wheel Group, yeah.
Trusted Information Systems. I'm sorry,
TIS, yeah.
TIS. So this was an ad campaign that came out, and of course we laughed at it at the time. 1998. She had a laptop, and it was running Windows 95. It was like, who hacks using Windows 95? Anyway,
I like that's what you folks saw in that picture. Is that Windows 95?
That's all I saw.
That's all.
Look at what the laptop is. That's crazy. That's so unrealistic. And you hack in high heels and nylons. But actually, Paul, you probably do that. So
sometimes
some of it's kind of lost. Anyway, that was my distraction on Sophos.
Yeah, funny how things come full circle.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of these. These are really two different instances, right? You've got security solutions providers integrating with the cloud provider's security solution. Then you've got security solutions providers that are like, hey, we're hosting our whole solution in the cloud that you can access, basically, John, what you were saying, right, over APIs. Sophos is touting, like, basically use our APIs to figure out if your files are malicious or whatever, right, and integrate our cloud solution into your security architecture.
Which is great for them because they're collecting more data, and that's beautiful, right? And I'm not saying that tongue in cheek or to be facetious or anything. I think it's a good play. I like the idea of being able to create an API that other people can have their tools integrate with your solutions. And it's interesting also seeing stuff like this come out, especially with Chronicle backstory imploding.
Yep.
In very
Yeah.
interesting.
What happened? Oh, so yeah. Go back to that. I saw some references to that, and I started looking into it, and I couldn't find anything. Chronicle, which is a Alphabet, which is Google, right? A Chronicle is a Google company under the Alphabet umbrella. When we saw them in RSA earlier this year, we're like, amazing. Your solution is shit hot, basically. And a lot of people agreed with us, right? But now what happened?
So from what I heard is the person that was running it kind of stopped caring. And this is all third party. So, this is kind of what I've heard and what I read. And then the other thing that I heard is Google likes to see their things explode dynamically, and it didn't explode the way Google wanted it to. So Google just kind of stopped supporting it at the level that they would have liked to get it. I mean, it was bad. I had a number of our customers that loved the model and they wanted to be early adopters, and their sales team wouldn't respond. And I used to think, well, you're probably a smaller company. They're hitting large companies first. And then I started seeing Fortune 100 companies that were not getting their calls returned. So it really looks like it was a brilliant technical idea, great engineers behind it, like closest thing to black magic I've seen at RSA in a long time. And honestly, that's what happens when you don't have management support behind something awesome. So Chronicle backstory, we will miss you.
Interesting. Let's see a couple more articles and funding news. And what's interesting is CyberGRX is like not cyber insurance. I'm getting that wrong. Third-party vendor assessment, right? Yeah, a global cyber risk exchange.
So are they cyber insurance related?
Related, yes. And
so they're more like an underwriter?
No, more like they validate third parties' security posture, right, based on scoring mechanisms and things like that. There's a whole subset in enterprise security that was born from that. But now what's interesting, if you look at the news, there was an MSP that got owned, and all of their customers got owned. Basically, the remote access software was compromised, and probably some level of password spraying and credential theft is my guess. And then we also had, during this Black Friday, Cyber Monday thing, like a dozen VPS providers, like, come host your website here, all of a sudden just shut down. Like on Friday of last week, they were like, yeah, Monday, we're shutting down. That's it. So a dozen spawned up, got a bunch of business. Who knows if they stole information, was what some of the articles were insinuating, and then closed down. And so what the cyber GRXs of the world can do is tell you, like, this company is secure or not, or what level are they secure, right? Security scorecard and companies like that. Those articles are a huge win for these companies. We see Cyber GRX just completed a $40 million Series D round. I'm not sure that played any influence into it, but the point is, who do you trust to be your MSP, to be your hosting provider, right? Has to undergo some scrutiny.
Yeah. My concern is the metrics that feed into these things. Is it actually a good predictor of whether or not the company will be breached? And I'd love to see one of these companies come on the show. It would be awesome. And they can say, look, here's a company that got breached. We were warning our customers a week or a month or 2 months beforehand, to kind of see that correlation.
Yeah.
Because right now our customers that are using these solutions for their vendors aren't telling me those stories. And I'm sure that those win stories exist out there. At least I hope they do. But I'd love to see that cause and effect. This organization was insecure. We saw indications of that. Then they got compromised, and we warned our people, and we had some people get out. I'd love to see those case studies and have them come on and talk about how often that actually happens.
I'd love to see them steer away from those VPSs, right, that were fly-by-night and then didn't score well and go, look, you should not use those. Right, Jeff?
I'm kind of curious as to, Cyber GRX as an example, not to pick on them, but, is their entire operation based on automated analytics, things that they're picking out over the technology, or is there any kind of element of research, OSINT, any kind of manual aspect to it?
There is, and they've been on the show. Cyber GRX has, and other companies. Yeah, I've been on the show. And there's definitely a manual verification step, and we've dug into some of these companies, and from what we tell there, I mean, they are doing their due diligence. But to John's point too, we want to see use cases, right, where they've steered someone away from a third-party vendor relationship because they scored poorly, and then maybe after that there was some kind of incident, and or breach.
Well, I don't know. Call me silly, but $100 million investment seems like a huge amount of money for this technology, this technique, this methodology. But I could be naive, but it just seems steep.
We'll bring him back on the show.
Okay.
Yep.
Happy to be proven wrong.
Yep. So.
And Cyberhaven was the last one.
Yes, I wanted to talk about this one.
This was interesting, right? Being able to detect my intellectual property is their claim.
Well, but it's more than that, right? So it sucks. You go down to the how it works, and they're like, well, instantly trace the path of exfiltrated data to immediately understand the full story, everywhere the data went, who accessed it, and when. And it indexes and reconstructs the flow of data across all assets. How are they doing that without full encryption interception or SSL TLS interception or an agent on all? I don't.
So they say there's no agent or very little config. I'm just like, if this works the way they claim in these articles and on their website, I'm super impressed, right? I want to know more.
But like I said, I love being wrong. But if I spend some time thinking about it, so what are they turning on? File and object tracing on Windows servers? Because if that's the case, which they could do, that is a tremendous logging overhead on systems. Not a bad thing. You can definitely filter that. If they're watching it on the wire, like here, the example is Bob exports a document from Salesforce with hundreds of client records. Okay, how do they see that without full TLS interception?
I'll say this. I got to the part of the article where it talks about the Cyberhaven team being 5 security researchers that are all PhDs and have worked at Stanford, MIT, EPFL, which I don't actually know what that one is, and UC Berkeley. They've got 4 patents. They've done DARPA work. That to me raises the bar of credibility, and maybe they, I'm as skeptical as the next person.
Well, but the DARPA thing,
but that does raise the bar a little bit. And if they can do that for 13 million, what's the other company doing for 100 million? Just saying.
Yeah, and the thing that got me about this article too, kind of last point here, is that Cyberhaven doesn't require any changes to the company's data applications, cloud services, or other IT infrastructure, or require a major policy creation or data classification effort to deploy. It's a pretty bold statement.
Let's get them on the show.
Yeah, agreed.
I agree with Jeff. I would just discard them immediately, but their background and I don't give a rip about PhDs. That doesn't, in fact, that actually lowers like my ability to say, yes, I agree with these people. But the fact that they actually are associated to have done work with DARPA. Usually with DARPA, you go in, you prove that you can do a technical capability, then they give you more funding. DARPA just, I don't know, I could be wrong. They don't necessarily throw money at things that are snake oil.
Right.
Well, let me clarify, because I can't have John have the last word. I agree with John that PhDs don't necessarily mean much, but what it says to me is they've got big brains with big ideas. Does that work in the real world? Maybe, maybe not. But they probably have a really fascinating idea here. It's whether it works or not is a different story.
Should look up their patents.
There you go.
Yep.
Now everyone's digging in deeper. A couple more stories in the show notes for everyone to check out, wiki.securityweekly.com. John and Jeff, thank you so much for helping out with the news this week. And with that, we'll take a short break and come back with James Carter from Logarithm.